Second. Good. Jim, we've worked together, traveled together,
all of those things.
planned, shared, celebrated. We've developed a lot of good friendships and relationships while you're here. Give us some memories and comments about those kinds of things. Maybe some of the people. A lot of people have come up. Who else?
One of the most striking things about KVCC is that relatively few people have left. So you have a wonderful opportunity to form these lasting friendships, and they do last. And it's been almost invariably very warm, very supportive. One of the things that struck me coming here was how welcoming the place was, and we heard even today from our speaker that she felt that. Maybe that was part of her pat speech, I don't know, but there's always been that sense here for me. Paul was hugely influential in my not only coming here, but in my early years, since he was either department chair or division chair after we reorganized. So my assignments always came that way. And Paul was always very supportive in saying, not to worry, we know you can handle this. And then after a time, of course, I was a little more willing to take some initiatives. We had some memorable times, I should say, on bicycle trips. We have gone, I was able to participate in, I think, maybe 4 or 5 of those. I didn't go cross country, but a number of times to Florida. And it is memorable to me to see how students gained from that activity. Paul and Phil Wilson had said, well, a lot of students study abroad, a lot of students have an opportunity to travel here and there, but they don't get an opportunity to get around in the United States. So let's see what we can do with that. And indeed, these trips, I think, helped in many ways. A lot of friendships formed there. Some of those students are still in the community. I see them. And it's kind of cool to see how that influenced their lives over the years. I think one of the most rewarding things any educator can have is to feel or to see the organization grow. Our enrollment has, of course, increased enormously. Our position in the community is rock solid. We have a very good reputation, and I think those of us who came in those early years have had the, shall we say, the honor to help build that reputation and serve our students. I think we've done very, very well at that. I'm very proud of this college. So a lot of warm fuzzies there.
All of you. You've been here over 30 years. When you arrived, did you have any notion that you'd be here 30-some years later? Or was this a stepping stone? Or did you see it as a career? Did you see it as not just the beginning, but the end, if you will, to a career? Because we've all grown great together here. And, what do you think, Marty? I'll let you start that one, and maybe hear from you too as well.
Well, I must have been young when I came here because I, like a lot of my students, I wasn't worried about the far future. The far future was, and I should explain, if you're 18 or 25 and you think, gosh, it's taken a long time to get here. I mean, just think about all the years you were in school, K-12, 4 years for a bachelor's degree, master's degree. So you're not worrying about old age. You're not worried about the far future. So I think I was trying to be a good junior community college instructor and listening and taking the lead and following good ideas. And I don't know that I thought too much in terms of the long term. I certainly wanted to do as well as I could, and see what my reaction was, see what the reaction of others would be. But if someone would have said to me, I've looked into the future, and I can tell you that you'll still be here 30 years hence, maybe my reaction would have been, well, I guess I must have done all right then. I don't know. So that's it helps me it helps me understand my students.
Mm-hmm.
When you sense that they're not all that concerned about their career or ultimately where they're going. When I think back to those days, and it's perfectly normal. So.
I certainly didn't have any intention of staying. When I had an experience at Michigan State with a couple of people, as with Bill, I was in a doctoral program and rapidly running out of money. But I had a committee member who suggested in the old traditional way that if you haven't done anything, by the time you're 30, you never will. Mm-hmm. And that time was fast approaching. I'd been in the military for almost 3 years and lost a little time there. I guess you could look at it that way. Anyway, when I came here, what had been implanted in me was, so you stay maybe 5 years and make your mark and move on to where the action is. And I still tell people today that I discovered in those 5 years that this is where the action was. That combined with what Marty's saying, very honestly, looking that far ahead was not part of it. I was just worried about my next prep. And what would that class fill, and my family was very young, and there were things that wrapped us up then, I think, in different ways. But the plan was to get ready and move on. Didn't work out that way.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience. In fact, I can remember telling Pete Rush, who asked me after a month or so how it was going. I said, "Oh, it's fine." He said, "Well, are you thinking about next year?" I said, "No, not really." But I said, "I'm an itinerant scholar. I plan to stay here a year and move on." And he said, you don't do that. He said, "I'm the dean who just hired you on a tenure track position, and don't tell me that you're leaving after a year." I said, "Well, that's been the model that I've had. Like Jim, I had a stint in the service, and there you saw people serve a year or two and move on, and you were always taught you were not irreplaceable. No one was, and that became kind of a motto. Then when I went to grad school and saw my professors there, that was the university model as well. Was teach for 2 to 5 years here, and you move on to a new position." So I'd plan to do the same thing too, Paul.
So what got you here, collectively?
Well, one thing Pete told me was, the grass is not greener.
Yeah.
And the next year, when I talked with him, I'd signed a contract to return. He said, "You listened to me." I says, "I think you're onto something." It has been, students often refer to it as Happy Valley. And it's sort of kitschy, but it has been that for me. I'm pleased, proud of the college, and am absolutely glad that I spent my career here.
Oh, what got you here?
I've said this many times. I was just going to say, I've said this many times, but people say, "Oh, you've been at KVCC for 30 years." And I say, "Yeah, I came here as a child, and they raised me." Or they're still
grew up
trying.
here,
Yeah, they're
right?
still trying to
Yeah.
raise me. I should mention that I did meet my future wife here, Pam Fox, who was a librarian, and for a time we had a group of KVCC singles, including people like Tom Oberlink that I'd gone to University of Michigan with, and Bill Trush and Bob Ludlow and Gail O'Hare and Pat Baker and
The Wild Bunch.
Yeah, the Wild
Yeah,
Bunch. I mean,
yeah.
as wild as we got back then, but
You stayed up occasionally past midnight, didn't you?
yeah. And that's really where I got to know Pam, and then in 1978 we got married. But I remember something that happened. It's been quite a few years ago, but one of my students said, well, he asked me, he said, do you have as a goal to move up to Western? And it was, I was a little offended because my response was, well, which way is up? I'm not sure that that is necessarily a better thing. We think of the university as something grand and has reeks with tradition. At least it did at U of M, and here at the community college. But I really feel that it has been, for the most part, a wonderful working environment. I've never lacked opportunity. So when I look back, or anybody looks back at my tenure here, I can't say, well, gosh, I just never had an opportunity. I never had a chance to do what was exciting or what was useful to students. And and then after a while, when you reach a certain point and you know that you're not going to get your doctorate, for example, you're not going to teach at a university, you don't even want to teach at a university because it's a very different kind of situation, at least at the traditional university, or has been. So it turned out to be, even on bad days, it was probably the closest I was going to get to academic heaven.
I have to echo both of these guys. Several things I was thinking of as Marty was talking. KVCC has always been very much a student service-oriented institution, and it struck me that we were getting so many people interested in our school for those reasons. We would hear from students and prospective faculty members that what a great place to be. We have freedom. The students are well served. They leave here and their careers flourish. They often stay in the community, or they go to a four-year institution and they make their way and they have good things to say about us. That's all very gratifying to an educator, I think, over the long haul. I've heard folks say, in fact, someone said to me a long time ago, is that what you're going to do the rest of your life, is to teach introductory psychology to semi-adolescents? What kind of a career is this? And my response typically was, well, I guess if you have to ask that question, you don't know about the teaching learning process very much, because it's always different, always fresh, always new students. It's kind of interesting because the students never get any older. We do. We go back this fall and face students, and they're all 18 to 25 years old, or somewhere in that range. Just as they were 25 years ago. And it does help, I think, to keep you very energetic and alive to be around young people. I've always found it to be that way. And KVCC was very welcoming in that sense.
Bill brought up Happy Valley, and I've asked a couple of others today about that. We've used that phrase, and sometimes it was in almost a derogatory manner, but other times with a degree of seriousness. And Bill says it has been Happy Valley for him. How about Marty and Jim? Was it? Is it? If so, what makes it so?
I think so, and we've had. On the one hand, I think that the KVCC has a reputation for having more of a centrally controlled. It's not like the traditional university where the schools and the deans have, or at least traditionally had, more autonomy in terms of direction and that kind of thing. But at the same time, in general studies and the humanities and the liberal arts, if there's something that we want to do, if there's a course that we want to put together, something maybe really brand new that hasn't been offered at KVCC or other colleges, we've always been able to do that. And we haven't had to get down on our knees and beg for the opportunity to do something new. And actually, if you could demonstrate within a reasonable amount of time that there was some interest in that, you could continue to do it. And so we do have a number of courses in the humanities department that are not dedicated to a specific career, but are more dedicated to learning about life and learning about yourself. And also in the humanities department, if you have the knowledge of a particular discipline, or you can move freely from course to course. I can write my own ticket in terms of courses that I teach. I could teach all music courses, which I have in the past, or I wouldn't try to teach religion or philosophy because I'm not qualified in those areas, but certainly in the humanities area, the China course, some of the visual arts courses, I feel very qualified. So lots of freedom there, and I think with respect to that, and also I think with the people here, it's been great to be close to people in the nursing faculty, to feel very comfortable with people, police academy, dental hygiene, all these different disciplines. They're not apart from you because they work in another program or discipline. I mean, they're colleagues, and I think that was one of the great ideas that Dale Lake had, was from the beginning to put all of us together so that you could shout across the hall or over the divider and talk with colleagues in many different disciplines. And it wasn't this, oh, the math people get all the money, or the nursing program gets all the publicity, I think. And so in that respect, it's been Happy Valley. Not some of the tension and the fighting that you sometimes have in some of the traditional universities and departments.
I think Marty, one of the things that Marty said really struck me is that we have an inordinate amount of freedom to teach courses, to move in one direction or another. And I think real good evidence for that is the initiative the college took 3 years ago to construct this new building at the West End. That came from the idea of constructing such a place guided by a philosophy that is really unique in many, many ways, is indicative of the kind of willingness that our leadership has been able to take in trying new things. And the new student commons area building is 57,000 square feet, a marvelous space where the humanities will flourish, I'm sure, with music and poetry and the like, and the fitness center. The germ of the idea came from a small group of faculty, 16 people who came together, talked about a subject they were somewhat interested in, mind-body studies. It led to a planning session at Yarrow, where ideas all day long were exchanged and recorded, and they actually, that dream, those ideas were translated into reality. And for an educator, that's extraordinary. We don't see that very often. So I think that's a good indicator of what Marty was getting at in terms of our willingness. Now, Happy Valley, of course, is an overall. There are the daily frustrations. There have been times where there were speed bumps as we went racing down the way. But by and large, it's been, I would use that term not as a pejorative at all, and say reflecting on my career, I don't think I'd change much. I was very glad I came here and had the opportunity to state.
One of the things that really makes me happy, Paul, is new things, changes, and the opportunity to do new things, like a new course or this wonderful new student center. 10 or 15 years ago, a bunch of us proposed an honors program here at the college, almost a separate college, not separate from the rest of the college, but separate in the sense that it would be an idea where students could be challenged more, and it would challenge those students we have at the upper end of the spectrum. And that was blessed by the administration. A person was given release time to help direct those students. That happened to be me, and it was a wonderful opportunity to do something new and exciting. And one of the most exciting things we did, at the end of 1 year, certain Paul Milliken came to me and proposed a project, a trip to historical sites in the South with honors students. And we put together a trip composed of 12 or 15 students and took them by van to Virginia. And Paul and I did a combined historical and literary tour of that part of the South. We visited battlefields, and Paul would give an extemporaneous talk there and point out which army was where and what division attacked here and how many thousands of young men from Michigan and Ohio are from Tennessee were killed in one hour or one volley even. He had students crying as we went through cemeteries. We visited Richmond and the Edgar Allan Poe House, and these are highlights of anybody's academic career for the students and for us teachers too.
Any final thought, ideas, something that's crossed your mind and you wanted to try to make sure you got it in before we wrap it up this session?
I thought of something. It's interesting how sometimes you have an opportunity to look into the history of a school. In fact, I've been working on a one-room school history, and you think about, I wonder what it was like back in the early days of the University of Michigan or Western Michigan College or Western Michigan Normal School as it was called back then. I wonder what it was like in the first days, the first year. And a long time had gone by before I thought, well, you know, you came the third year, speaking to myself, you came to the third year of this institution, and you know many of the people who were here on the first day of this institution. And so here was an experience much like that I had wondered about and thinking about some of the older institutions in the state. So we were pioneers, even those of us that came after 1968.
After the pioneers,
yeah,
right.
right.
Anything else?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for coming on such a nasty rainy day.
Wow. And he was on the faculty here when I
Yeah,
came.
he
wasn't
was on the faculty. It was a second career for him. He
he? Yeah.
had been a career officer in the Marine Corps, athletic director, basketball coach, men's basketball coach, KVCC. Dick, I'd like you to begin by telling us about your background and experience prior to coming to KVCC, and then what caused you to come to KVCC. How did that come about?
Well, I grew up in New Paris, Ohio. I went to college at Wittenberg University, played basketball at Wittenberg, and then went to University of Akron to get a master's degree. Actually, I worked as part-time when I was coaching and teaching at Wadsworth High School right out of college. I coached cross country and basketball. And then I did a graduate assistantship at Akron University. I was at Wadsworth for 3 years, 1 year as a JV coach in basketball and 2 years as a head coach. And then I was graduate assistant at Akron University for a year and then became a full-time assistant. And then I came to Kalamazoo in 1970, coached with Eldon Miller at Western Michigan for 6 years. And then he went on to Ohio State, and I became the head coach at Western for 3 years. Didn't win enough games. In 1979, my contract was not renewed at Western, so I came to talk to Dr. Lake. In fact, I got to know Dr. Lake at that time at a Polish-American golf outing down at Old Mill Golf Course, and he and I were paired together, and we had a delightful time. And I was the head coach at Western at that time, and I still think to this day, had I not gotten to know him that day like I did, he may never have asked me to come out and interview for the position. But I had 3 different interviews with him. I had some other job opportunities in '79, but one of the things that I was impressed with is the timing was such that KVCC was taking a hard look at their athletic program and whether they wanted to continue an athletic program or not. had not had a whole lot of success in what they called the showcase sports, being men's and women's basketball. Be showcase only in terms of getting more publicity in the Kalamazoo Gazette than the other sports. They had success with Darrell Davies' tennis program, and they'd had success in softball. But their basketball program had really struggled, especially men's basketball. In fact, I think in the first 13 years prior to my coming, they had had only one winning season. That was a 9-8 season, I think, when Phil Wilson was coaching. So Dr. Lake was real concerned about what he had to do to turn it around. So he had, right at the time that I was released at Western, unbeknownst to me, he was ordering a survey, actually, that Phil Wilson and Bob Sack and Dick Olivani and a lot of area high school coaches and athletic directors participated in. He asked questions like, in your mind, what would a community college athletic program need to be successful? How would you measure success? All of that came together in April of 1979, and Dr. Lake and I had several discussions prior to that. And basically the recommendation was to hire a full-time basketball coach that could also be athletic director and possibly even coach one other sport. So I agreed to be that person. One of the reasons was because of the criteria that Dr. Lake had set up for success. I was still kind of hurting from being fired at Western, and I wanted to be sure I didn't get into a situation where in a couple of years I was going to be released because I didn't win enough. And we had 4 criteria for success that we have hung our hat on all these years. And it's he wanted to be competitive in the win-loss column. He stated that right up front in that report. I certainly agreed with that. He said he was tired of being the doormat. Secondly, and I liked this, the wording of it was of equal, if not greater importance, is the extent to which our student athletes are able to achieve their academic goals. And I had always preached that in my experience prior to coming to KVCC, so I thought, boy, that's really good. And the third was one that's difficult to measure. Success in an athletic program would be determined by the attitude of the athletes in the program, their self-esteem, their feeling good about their experience, their respect for their coaches, their teammates, and something that, again, is very hard to measure, but just that feeling that when the experience is over, I've done something worthwhile. It's been worth the hours I've spent in the gym or on the field. And then his fourth criteria we both agreed would follow if we accomplished the other 3, and the fourth one was the extent to which our student athletes would be viewed by the community at large and by four-year institutions. Dr. Lake used the word that he wanted KVCC to become a place that was a viable alternative for student athletes in high school to go, rather than a place of last resort, which the report had kind of said was happening at that time. Since then, we've started an honors program. We've had academic All-Americans. We have an academic All-State and academic All-Region awards and All-Conference that we give to our student athletes, and I'm proud to be a part of KVCC. Probably has had as many, if not more, than any other community college in our state, student athletes that have achieved that kind of academic recognition.
Great. You haven't been disappointed. Starting the 23rd year or 24th, and have had a great deal of success.
Starting the 23rd year. Mm-hmm.
Did you have any idea when you came that if it all worked, that this would be the career, that it would be the end of the story as well?
I didn't really think about that. I just took 1 year at a time, and I felt that we added 2 sports when I came on board. We added men's golf, which Dr. Lake called me and asked me to coach a couple of weeks after we added it, and we added women's tennis. And both of those programs have done very well through the years. We're one of the few community colleges that has been able to maintain 8 sports through that 22-year period. Most of them have had a net loss over that period of time. A few have gained a sport or 2, but I feel very blessed to have been able to come in under a person like Dr. Lake and then continue under a person like Marilyn Schlack. A lot of my colleagues have had 4, 5, 6 presidents at least at their community college in that period of time. And I think part of the stability of our athletic program is directly a result of the stability of the leadership at the top. Dr. Lake was very supportive, and Dr. Schlack has been very supportive also of the things that we're doing. And When I said to Dr. Lake, I really wanted to know what he thought about how soon I would have to win, because I wanted to know am I going to have to win a state championship or a conference or even a national tournament, and he's going to want to get rid of me. And I distinctly remember when I asked him that question, he laughed, and he said he did not expect to be like a Vincennes, which this is no reflection on Vincennes, but they've put more money into basketball recruiting than we have to run 8 sports with. And that's just a commitment that they made at their institution. And I didn't want to schedule Vincennes because I knew from being at Western Michigan that we're not going to beat Vincennes, especially with Southwestern Michigan players mostly. So, but he understood that, and his reality matched the rhetoric that he was saying. And it took us 6 years. We won between 17 and 22 games in those first 6 years, and then in '86 we had a breakthrough and won a state championship in men's basketball. Now we've won 5 of them in that 22-year period. We've averaged over 21